Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the enemy fleet approach through the darkness of space. The sight made his stomach turn cold. 300 alien ships moved toward them like a swarm of angry insects, their dark hulls glowing with weapon energy. Behind Morrison, only 11 other human ships remained floating in the void around New Haven mining colony. Earth was gone. 3 months ago, the blue planet that had been humanity's home for millions of years had fallen to the Zephyrian Collective. Morrison had watched the news feeds until the very last transmission cut to static. Every major city burned. Every military base destroyed. Every space elevator collapsed. The lucky ones died quickly. Now the last humans in the galaxy faced their final battle. "Captain, enemy fleet will be in weapons range in 20 minutes, said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her position at the tactical station. Her voice stayed steady, but Morrison could see her hands shaking slightly as she worked her controls. Amy had been with him for 5 years, through battles against pirates and alien raiders. She had never seen anything like this. "How many ships are we looking at, Amy?" Morrison asked, though he already knew the answer would be bad news. 312 confirmed contacts, sir. All Zephyrian heavy cruisers and battleships. They have us outnumbered 25-1. Amy's fingers danced across her screen, trying to find some tactical advantage that didn't exist. "Sir, we could try to run for the jump point. Maybe some of us could escape." Morrison shook his head. "They have scouts watching every exit. We wouldn't make it halfway before they cut us down." He walked over to the communication station where Ensign Lisa Turner sat wearing her headset. "Lisa, are you still getting reports from the other ships?" Lisa nodded, her young face pale but determined. "Yes, sir. Captain Palmer on the Vigilant reports his weapons are ready. Captain Sullivan on the Resilient says her engines are running hot but stable. All ships are reporting green status and ready for battle." In the engineering section below, Chief Petty Officer Pete Johnson's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, I've got the reactor running at 110%. She'll hold together for whatever you need her to do." Morrison looked out at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there, other alien species lived and worked and raised their children, not knowing that the Zephyrians were coming for them too. The collective had a simple plan that they followed on every world they conquered. They would study their enemy, learn their weaknesses, and then destroy every single member of that species. Not just the military, not just the government. Everyone. Men, women, children, elderly. Every human who had ever drawn breath would be dead within the next few hours. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what came after. "Sir," Amy called out, "I'm picking up a transmission from the enemy fleet. It's directed at us." "Put it on screen." The main display flickered and showed the bridge of a Zephyrian command ship. The alien commander was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. Its eyes were completely black, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding metal. "I am Fleet Commander Vexithara of the Zephyrian Collective. You are the final representatives of the species, called humans. Your planet has been cleansed. Your colonies have been eliminated. Your fleets have been destroyed. You are the last." Morrison stepped forward. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. We're not surrendering." Vexithara's head tilted slightly, as if the concept of resistance was mildly interesting. "Surrender is not required. Your destruction is inevitable. However, I will offer you the same choice I have offered to 47 other species before yours. One of your ships may survive until the end to witness the complete elimination of your kind. This ship will then be destroyed, after you have seen that no trace of humanity remains in this galaxy." The alien commander continued speaking in that grinding voice. "This is how we ensure that conquered species understand the totality of their defeat. You will watch your friends die. You will watch your ships burn. You will know that your children and families are already dead. Only then will your species truly understand that the Zephyrian Collective cannot be stopped." Morrison felt anger burning in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "And after we're all dead, what then?" "Then humanity will be forgotten, as all Conquered species are forgotten. Your history will be erased. Your achievements will be destroyed. Your art and culture will turn to dust. In 50 years, no being in this galaxy will remember that humans ever existed. This is the fate of all who oppose the collective. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Morrison turned to his crew. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders that would probably be the last orders he ever gave. Amy's hands had stopped shaking. Lisa sat up straighter in her chair. Even Pete's voice over the intercom sounded steadier. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "we could try to take some of them with us. If we coordinate our attacks, we might be able to destroy a few of their ships before they finish us." "That won't change anything," Morrison replied. "They'll still complete their mission. Humanity will still be extinct in a few hours." He walked back to his command chair but didn't sit down. An idea was forming in his mind. It was crazy and desperate, but it might be the only chance they had to accomplish something meaningful with their deaths. "Lisa, open a channel to all our ships. I want to speak to every captain." "Channel open, sir." Morrison took a deep breath. "This is Captain Morrison to all remaining fleet vessels. You've all heard the Zephyrian offer. They want one of us to survive long enough to watch the others die. They think this will break our spirit and prove their superiority." He paused, looking out at the stars again. "But I think we can use their arrogance against them. They want us to despair. They want us to feel helpless. Instead, I propose we give them something they've never encountered before. I propose we show them what humanity really stands for." Captain Palmer's voice came through the speaker from the Vigilant. "What do you have in mind, Jake?" "The Zephyrians have perfect memory recall. Everything they see and hear gets stored in their data banks forever. They use this to study their enemies and to remember their victories. But what if we gave them memories they didn't expect? What if we made sure they remember humanity not as victims, but as who we really are?" Captain Sullivan from the Resilience joined the conversation. "Are you talking about some kind of last message? A final transmission?" "More than that," Morrison said. "I'm talking about making our final stand into something that will stick with them forever. They want to erase us from history. Instead, we're going to make sure the galaxy never forgets what humans were capable of." The idea was taking shape as he spoke. Morrison could see the shocked faces of his bridge crew, but also the growing understanding in their eyes. "They're going to kill us no matter what we do," he continued. "But they're also going to remember everything that happens in the next few hours. Every word we speak, every action we take, every choice we make. We can't save our lives, but we might be able to save our story." Amy looked up from her tactical display. "Captain, enemy fleet is now 15 minutes out. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide fast." Morrison sat down in his command chair and activated the fleet-wide communication system one more time. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison. Prepare to implement the human mercy rule. We're about to spare one enemy so the galaxy remembers us." Colonel Frank Wright stood in the classroom aboard the science vessel USS Explorer, pointing at a holographic display that showed ancient Earth battlefields. The ship was one of the 12 remaining human vessels, and its main purpose had been to preserve human knowledge and history. Now that purpose felt more important than ever. The mercy rule didn't start in space, Colonel Wright explained to the small group of officers gathered around him. It began thousands of years ago on Earth, in the wars between our earliest civilizations. Dr. Helen Carter, the fleet's chief scientist who studied alien life forms, sat in the front row taking notes. Behind her, several other officers from different ships had gathered via video link to hear Wright's emergency briefing about human military history. "Ancient warriors discovered something interesting," Wright continued. "When they completely destroyed an enemy army, leaving no survivors, the victory felt hollow. No one would remember the battle. No stories would be told. The defeated enemy would just disappear, and their sacrifice would mean nothing." The holographic display changed to show medieval knights and samurai warriors. So human fighters developed a tradition. After winning a battle, they would deliberately spare one enemy soldier. This survivor would be allowed to return home and tell the story of what happened. Not just the defeat, but how bravely their comrades had fought, how they had died with honor. Dr. Carter raised her hand. But why would winning armies want their enemies to be remembered as heroes? Wright smiled sadly. Because humans understood something that other species apparently don't. Victory without witness is meaningless. If you destroy your enemy so completely that no one remembers they existed, then your victory disappears too. But if you let one person live to tell the story, then both the victory and the defeat become part of history forever. The display showed more recent conflicts from Earth's past. World wars, space battles, colonial conflicts. In each case, Wright pointed out examples of soldiers who had been spared to carry messages or tell stories. The mercy rule became official, military doctrine about 200 years ago, Wright said. Every human military officer learns it in basic training. In any conflict, always leave one enemy alive to remember what happened, not as a threat or a warning, but as a witness to history. Meanwhile, on her own ship, Dr. Carter was conducting her own research. She had spent the last 3 months studying everything the human fleet knew about Zephyrian psychology and culture. What she had discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The Zephyrians were not just conquerors, they were memory collectors. Carter's laboratory was filled with data screens showing Zephyrian brain scans, cultural records, and intercepted communications. Her assistant, a young researcher named Bobby Clark, helped her sort through the information. "Doctor, look at this," Bobby said, pointing to a series of neural patterns on his screen. Zephyrian brains are completely different from human brains. They don't forget anything, ever. Carter studied the data. Perfect recall. Every sight, sound, smell, and experience gets stored permanently in their memory centers. No wonder they're such effective military strategists. They can remember every detail of every battle they've ever fought. But there's something else, Bobby continued. Look at these cultural records we captured from their destroyed scout ships. The Zephyrians don't just remember their own experiences. They deliberately preserve the final moments of every species they conquer. Carter felt a chill run down her spine. "Show me." Bobby brought up files that contained detailed records of the Zephyrians' previous conquests. 47 different alien species had been completely destroyed by the collective, but the Zephyrians had kept perfect records of how each species had died. They don't just kill their enemies, Carter realized. They study them. They preserve every detail of the final battle, every last word spoken, every desperate attempt to survive. It's like they're collecting the death moments of entire civilizations. Why would they do that? Bobby asked. Carter thought for a moment. Psychology. Fear. They want other species to know that resistance is hopeless. When they encounter a new enemy, they can show them exactly how previous enemies died. It's the ultimate psychological weapon. She stood up and paced around the laboratory. But there's something they don't realize. Their perfect memory could be used against them. On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Captain Morrison was explaining his plan to the other ship captains via video conference. The enemy fleet was now only 10 minutes away from weapons range. "The Zephyrians think they're giving us a choice," Morrison said. "One ship survives to watch the others die, then gets destroyed last. They think this will maximize our despair and prove their superiority." Captain Palmer from the Vigilant leaned forward on his screen. "But you want to turn that around, somehow?" "Exactly. They're going to preserve everything that happens in the next hour. Every word we speak, every action we take, every choice we make will be stored in their memory banks forever. They can't forget it, even if they want to." Captain Sullivan from the Resilience looked confused. "I still don't understand how that helps us. We're still going to be dead." Morrison activated another screen that showed Dr. Carter's research. "Dr. Carter has been studying Zephyrian psychology. Tell them what you found, Helen." Carter's image appeared on the conference screen. "The Zephyrians have conquered 47 species, but they've learned nothing about any of them except how they died. Their memory archives contain detailed records of final battles, last words, and death scenes. But they know nothing about what those species were like when they were alive. They study endings, not beginnings," Morrison added. "They know how every conquered species fell, but they don't know what made those species worth preserving in the first place." Captain Alex Thompson from the USS Stalwart spoke up. So what are you proposing we do about it? Morrison stood up and walked to the front of his bridge. We're going to give them something their perfect memory has never encountered before. Instead of just showing them how humans die, we're going to show them how humans live. We're going to fill their memory banks with who we really are. The other captains exchanged glances on their screens. The plan was starting to make sense, but it was also terrifying. Each ship will be destroyed in sequence, Morrison continued. But before we die, we're going to broadcast everything that makes humanity special. Our art, our music, our stories, our dreams. We're going to make sure that when the Zephyrians remember this battle, they don't just remember human death. They remember human life. Dr. Carter's voice cut in. Their perfect memory means they cannot forget what they experience. If we can make our final moments meaningful enough, those memories will stay with them forever. They might even start to question why they destroy species instead of learning from them. Colonel Wright, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. The mercy rule in reverse. Instead of sparing one enemy to remember us, we're going to make our enemies remember us whether they want to or not. But will it work? Captain Palmer asked. Morrison looked out at the approaching enemy fleet. I don't know, but I know that dying as victims won't accomplish anything. At least this way we die as teachers. We die as humans who refuse to let their story end with just their destruction. The communication screens flickered as enemy weapons began to interfere with their signals. All ships, prepare for battle, Morrison said. Remember, we're not fighting to win. We're fighting to be remembered. Each captain choose what you want the galaxy to know about humanity. Make it count. As the screens went dark, Morrison turned to his crew. Amy, prepare our cultural database for broadcast. Lisa, open channels to transmit on all Zephyrian frequencies. Pete, give me everything the engines have got. The enemy fleet was now in weapons range. The final battle for humanity was about to begin, but it would be unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen. The first human ship to die was the USS Vigilant. Captain Nick Palmer watched his tactical display as 20 Zephyrian warships surrounded his vessel. His shields were failing, his weapons were nearly out of power, and his engine room was on fire. But Palmer wasn't thinking about dying. He was thinking about what story he wanted to tell. All hands, this is the captain, Palmer announced over the ship's intercom. We have about 2 minutes before they finish us off. I want everyone to listen carefully to what I'm about to broadcast. Palmer activated the communication system and began transmitting on all frequencies that the Zephyrians were monitoring. He knew they were listening. Their perfect memory would record every word. My name is Captain Nicholas Palmer of the human vessel USS Vigilant. I want to tell you about the first time a human being looked up at the stars and decided to visit them. The Zephyrian weapons continued to tear apart his ship, but Palmer kept talking. 200 years ago, there was a little girl named Maria Santos who lived in a small town on Earth. Every night, she would climb onto her roof and look up at the stars through a telescope her grandfather had built for her. She would count the stars and wonder if anyone else was out there looking back at her. Palmer's bridge shook violently as another weapon blast hit them. His navigation officer reported that life support was failing, but Palmer continued his story. Maria grew up and became a scientist. She spent her whole life building better telescopes and faster spaceships. She never got to travel to the stars herself, but her daughter did, and her daughter's daughter. And eventually, Maria's great-great-granddaughter became the first human to set foot on a planet outside our solar system. The Zephyrian fleet commander, Vexithara, watched from his flagship as the human vessel burned. But something unusual was happening. Instead of begging for mercy or cursing their enemies, the human captain was telling a story about a little girl and her telescope. Palmer's voice crackled through space as his ship began to break apart. That little girl's name is on a metal plate attached to every human spaceship that has ever been built. We carry her memory with us to remind ourselves that exploration begins with wonder, that every time we look up at the stars, we're continuing. A dream that started with a child on a rooftop. The USS Vigilant exploded in a ball of flame and debris, but Palmer's final words echoed in the perfect memory banks of every Zephyrian ship in the fleet. We came to the stars not as conquerors, but as Maria's children still looking up in wonder. On the bridge of his flagship, Fleet Commander Vexithera felt something he had never experienced before. Confusion. In 47 previous conquests, no enemy captain had ever used their final moments to tell a story about a little girl with a telescope. The second ship to die was the USS Resilience. Captain Kate Sullivan had been a musician before she joined the military. As 20 more Zephyrian ships focused their weapons on her vessel, she decided to share something the galaxy had never heard before. This is Captain Kate Sullivan to all listening vessels. I want to play you some music. Sullivan activated her ship's entertainment system and began broadcasting songs from Earth. Not military marches or battle hymns, but something much more human. The first song was a lullaby that human mothers had sung to their babies for thousands of years. The gentle melody drifted through space as the Zephyrian weapons slowly destroyed Sullivan's ship. This song was written by a woman whose name we've forgotten, Sullivan said over the music. She created it to help her child fall asleep safely. But the song was so beautiful that other mothers began singing it too. It spread from one family to another, from one generation to the next, until millions of human children heard this melody as they went to sleep. The lullaby ended and Sullivan played another song. This one was faster with drums and guitars. It was music for dancing and celebrating. This is what we played at weddings, Sullivan explained. When two humans decided to spend their lives together, their friends and families would gather and dance to music like this. The song doesn't matter as much as the feeling of community, of sharing joy with people you love. Vexithera found himself listening to these strange human sounds. Zephyrian culture had no equivalent to music. They communicated through precise clicks and whistles that conveyed information efficiently, but this human music seemed to serve no practical purpose except to create emotions. Sullivan played a third song, slower and sadder. This is what we called blues music. Humans created it when they were suffering. When life was hard and unfair, they would sing songs about their pain. But somehow, sharing that pain through music made it easier to bear. It reminded us that we weren't alone in our struggles. The USS Resilience was now breaking apart, but Sullivan's voice remained steady. We didn't create music to send messages or win battles. We created it because being human means feeling things deeply, and music was how we shared those feelings with each other. Every song was a way of saying, "You are not alone." The ship exploded, but the music continued to play in the memory banks of the Zephyrian fleet. The third ship to die was the USS Stalwart. Captain Alex Thompson had been a doctor before the war. As his ship faced its final moments, he decided to share humanity's greatest achievements in healing and helping others. "I'm transmitting the complete human medical database," Thompson announced. "Not our weapons or our military technology, but our knowledge of how to save lives." Thompson's communication officer began broadcasting thousands of years of human medical discoveries, treatments for diseases, surgical techniques, medicines that could ease pain and cure illnesses. "This is how we learned to heal broken bones," Thompson explained as his ship shuddered under enemy fire. "This is how we discovered medicines that could cure infections. This is how we developed ways to replace damaged organs and give sight to the blind." But Thompson didn't just share the technical information. He told stories about the humans who had made these discoveries. Dr. Elena Rodriguez spent 30 years of her life studying a disease that killed children. She worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to find a cure. When she finally succeeded, she refused to profit from her discovery. She gave the medicine away for free because she said no child should die from something that could be prevented. Thompson's tactical officer reported that their weapons were completely destroyed and their shields were down to 5%. But Thompson kept talking. Nurse Jimmy Walsh worked in the emergency rooms of our busiest hospitals. During a plague that killed millions of humans, he refused to evacuate to safety. He stayed with the sick patients, caring for them even though he knew he might die too. He said that someone had to hold their hand so they wouldn't die alone. Vexithera watched as another human ship prepared to die. But again, instead of weapons or threats, The humans were sharing stories about healing and sacrifice. We built hospitals on every world we colonized, Thompson continued, not just for humans, but for any species that needed help. We shared our medicine freely because we believed that suffering was the enemy, not other living beings. The USS Stalwart was torn apart by Zephyrian weapons, but Thompson's final transmission contained something unprecedented. The complete record of human compassion translated into practical action. In the command center of the Zephyrian flagship, the memory analysts were struggling to process what they were experiencing. Every previous conquest had followed the same pattern. Enemy ships would fight desperately, then beg for mercy, then curse their destroyers as they died. But these humans were doing something completely different. They were teaching. Vexithera realized that his perfect memory now contained the lullabies that human mothers sang to their children, the medical knowledge that human doctors used to save lives, and the story of a little girl who looked up at the stars and dreamed of touching them. For the first time in his military career, Vexithera began to wonder what the 47 other species his fleet had destroyed might have taught him if he had bothered to listen. The USS Defiance was now one of only 3 human ships left alive. Captain Jake Morrison stood on his damaged bridge, watching as Zephyrian warships surrounded them. His ship's hull was cracked, his engines were failing, and half his crew was injured. But Morrison felt strangely calm. The plan was working better than he had hoped. "Captain," Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez called from her tactical station. "I'm reading massive data transfers throughout the Zephyrian fleet. They're sharing the transmissions from our destroyed ships with their entire command structure." Morrison smiled grimly. "They can't help themselves. Their perfect memory means they have to preserve everything they've heard. And now they're spreading our stories to every ship in their fleet." On the main screen, the image of Fleet Commander Vexithera appeared. The alien commander looked different than before. His black eyes seemed troubled, and his forearms moved restlessly as he spoke. "Human Morrison," Vexithera said, his metallic voice carrying a tone that Morrison had never heard from a Zephyrian before. "Uncertainty. Your ships have been transmitting unusual data during their destruction. This behavior does not match any previous conquest patterns in our database." Morrison stepped forward. "We're not following your patterns, Commander. We're following our own." "Explain this behavior," Vexithera demanded. "Your vessels could have used their final moments to coordinate attacks or attempt escape strategies. Instead, they broadcast irrelevant cultural information. This serves no tactical purpose." "Doesn't it?" Morrison asked. "Tell me, Commander, in all your previous conquests, how much did you learn about the species you destroyed?" Vexithera was quiet for a long moment. "We learned their military capabilities, their technological strengths and weaknesses, their tactical responses under pressure. This information ensures efficient conquest. But what about who they were as people, what they valued, what they created, what they loved? Such information is irrelevant to military operations." Morrison shook his head. "You've conquered 47 civilizations, but you know nothing about any of them except how they died. You have the memory of a perfect computer, but you've never used it to actually understand your enemies." The conversation was being broadcast to the entire Zephyrian
fleet.
Morrison knew that thousands of alien soldiers were listening to every word, and their perfect memory would preserve this moment forever. "Your people have been filling our memory banks with cultural data," Vexithera said. "Stories about children, and music and medicine. Why do you believe this information has value?" Morrison walked closer to the screen. "Because that's who we are. You want to erase humanity from the galaxy, but you can't erase us until you understand what you're actually destroying. We understand perfectly. You are an inferior species that resisted the collective. Your elimination ensures galactic stability." "Really?" Morrison challenged. "Then tell me about the 47 species you destroyed before us. Tell me about their art, their families, their dreams. Tell me what they created, what they loved, what made them unique." Vexithera's forearms stopped moving. For several seconds, the alien commander said nothing. "You can't, can you?" Morrison continued. You have perfect memory, but you never bothered to learn anything worth remembering. You destroyed 47 civilizations, and all you know about them is how they screamed when they died. Dr. Helen, Carter's voice came over the intercom from the science deck. Captain, the Zephyrian memory patterns are showing unusual activity. I think our transmissions are causing some kind of psychological disruption in their command structure. Morrison nodded. They're not used to thinking about their enemies as real people. For the first time, they're being forced to consider that maybe the species they've been destroying had value beyond their military resistance. On his screen, Vexithara seemed to be struggling with some internal conflict. The collective's mission is to eliminate chaos and resistance. Species that cannot be controlled must be destroyed for the greater good. But how do you know if something is worth preserving if you never bother to understand what it is? Morrison asked. What if the species you destroyed had knowledge that could have helped the galaxy? What if they had art that could have brought beauty to empty worlds? What if they had wisdom that could have solved problems you don't even know exist yet? Behind Vexithara, other Zephyrian officers were visible on the bridge. Some of them appeared to be accessing data terminals, probably reviewing the cultural transmissions from the destroyed human ships. Your species showed us how to heal diseases, Morrison continued. We taught you songs that human mothers sang to their children. We shared stories about wonder and exploration and the drive to reach for the stars. None of that information was in your military databases, was it? No, Vexithara admitted quietly. And in 47 previous conquests, you never learned anything like that about your enemies. You never discovered their music or their medicine or their dreams. You just killed them and moved on. Morrison could see that his words were having an effect. The alien commander was accessing his own memory banks, probably reviewing the human cultural data that had been transmitted during the battle. There is a concept in your transmissions that our translators cannot properly interpret, Vexithara said finally. Your species repeatedly references something called mercy. Our language has no equivalent term. Morrison felt a spark of hope. Mercy means choosing not to cause harm when you have the power to do so. It means recognizing that your enemy is a living being with value, even when you're at war with them. This concept serves no practical purpose. Doesn't it? You could have destroyed our ships in seconds with your superior firepower. Instead, you always leave one ship alive to witness the defeat of the others. Why? Vexithara paused. To maximize psychological impact, to ensure the defeated species understands the totality of their failure. But that means you already understand the value of leaving witnesses. You already practice a form of mercy, even if you don't call it that. The difference is we use mercy to preserve understanding. You use it to create fear. Morrison's communication officer, Lisa Turner, looked up from her station. Captain, we're detecting something unusual. The Zephyrian fleet is accessing their historical databases. They appear to be reviewing records from their previous conquests. On the main screen, Vexithara's expression was becoming more troubled. We are analyzing the data from species number 34, the Calarian civilization. They transmitted final messages about their offspring and family structures before destruction. And you never listened to those messages before today, did you? No, they were classified as irrelevant battlefield communications. Morrison stepped even closer to the screen. We're going to give you our mercy rule, Commander. We're going to spare one of you to remember us properly. Vexithara's head tilted in confusion. You are in no position to spare anyone. Your extinction is imminent. Are we? Your perfect memory has already recorded everything we've shared. Every story, every song, every piece of medical knowledge, every expression of human wonder and compassion. You cannot forget any of it, even if you want to. And now you're starting to look back at the other species you destroyed, wondering what you might have learned from them if you had bothered to listen. Morrison could see the realization dawning on the alien commander's face. For the first time, in Zephyrian history, you're going to remember a conquered species not just as enemies who died, but as people who lived. You're going to carry our story with you forever, and every time you conquer another species, you're going to wonder what their story might have been. Morrison's ship shuddered as Zephyrian weapons began their final bombardment. That's our mercy to you, Commander. We're making you remember that your enemies are people. And that's our curse on you too. You wanted to erase us from history. Instead, we've made ourselves part of you forever. The transmission ended as the USS Defiance erupted, in flames, but Morrison's final words echoed through the memory banks of every ship in the Zephyrian fleet. 1 year after the last human died, Fleet Commander Vexithera stood before the Zephyrian High Council in their capital city, on the planet Zeftar. The great chamber was filled with the most powerful leaders of the collective, their black eyes focused on him as he prepared to deliver his final report on the human conquest. But Vexithera felt different than he had a year ago. The perfect memory that all Zephyrians possessed meant that he could recall every detail of that final battle, every word Captain Morrison had spoken, every song that Captain Sullivan had played, every story about healing and wonder and mercy that the humans had shared as they died. The species known as humans has been completely eliminated, Vexithera began, his metallic voice echoing through the chamber. All 12 of their remaining vessels were destroyed. No survivors remain. Earth and their colonies show no signs of life. The conquest was militarily successful. High Counselor Zarthek, the oldest and most respected leader of the collective, leaned forward. Yet your report suggests there were unusual circumstances during this conquest. Explain these irregularities. Vexithera hesitated. How could he explain what had happened without sounding like he had lost his mind? The humans did not behave like previous conquered species. Instead of using their final moments to fight or flee, they chose to transmit cultural information, stories, music, scientific knowledge, and philosophical concepts that they considered important to their identity. Cultural information? Another counselor, Vex Mora, clicked disapprovingly. Why was this data not immediately deleted from our memory banks? Because our memory systems automatically preserve all data encountered during military operations, Vexithara replied. The human transmissions were classified as enemy communications and stored permanently in our archives. What Vexithara didn't mention was what had happened in the months following the battle. The human cultural data had become the most accessed information in the entire Zephyrian military database. Soldiers were requesting copies of human music. Scientists were studying human medical techniques. Even children in Zephyrian schools were learning about human stories and art. Dr. Zekmora, the collective's chief memory keeper, stepped forward. Fleet Commander, our analysis of your memory patterns shows unusual neural activity related to the human data. These patterns are spreading throughout the military personnel who participated in the conquest. Can you explain this phenomenon? Vexithara knew he was in dangerous territory. The human concept of mercy has no equivalent in our language or culture. Attempting to understand their motivations has required new neural pathways to develop. This may be causing the unusual brain activity. But that wasn't the whole truth either. The real truth was that Vexithara found himself thinking about Captain Morrison's words almost every day. The human captain had said that the Zephyrians destroyed civilizations without ever understanding what they were destroying. And now, for the first time in his life, Vexithara was wondering about the other 47 species his fleet had eliminated. Request permission to access historical files, Vexithara said suddenly. The High Council exchanged glances. For what purpose? The humans claimed that we destroyed 47 civilizations without learning anything meaningful about them. I wish to verify this claim by reviewing the final transmissions from previous conquests. High Counselor Zarthek's forearms moved, in a gesture of approval. Permission granted. Display the data for the Council to review. The chamber's holographic displays activated, showing records from the collective's previous military campaigns. Vexithara accessed the files from Conquest Number 34, the Calarian civilization that he had mentioned to Captain Morrison. The final moments of the Calarian resistance played out in the chamber. As their ships burned, the aliens had, indeed, transmitted messages about their families and children, just as Morrison had said. But the Zephyrian forces had classified these transmissions as irrelevant battlefield noise and never analyzed them. Display Conquest Number 19, Vexithara requested. The record showed another alien species making their final stand. In their last moments, they had broadcast what appeared to be mathematical equations and star charts, scientific knowledge that might have been valuable, but the Zephyrian military had ignored it completely. Display Conquest, number 7. This species had filled their final transmissions with artistic images and creative works. Beautiful, complex designs that had meaning to their culture, but which the collective had never bothered to study or understand. The pattern was clear. For 47 conquests, the Zephyrians had encountered dying civilizations trying to preserve what mattered most to them. And for 47 conquests, the collective had ignored everything except military data. The humans were correct, Vexithara admitted to the Silent Council. We have been destroying civilizations without learning anything about what made them unique or valuable. High Counselor Zarthek's voice carried a warning tone. Are you suggesting that our military doctrine is flawed? Before Vexithara could answer, Dr. Zekmora interrupted. High Counselor, we have a more immediate problem. The human cultural data has begun spreading beyond military personnel. Civilian populations are accessing the information and displaying unusual behavioral changes. What kind of changes? Zarthek demanded. Young Zephyrians are attempting to create something they call music. Scientists are requesting funding to study healing techniques from the human medical database. Some citizens have even requested permission to establish what they call hospitals to help injured or sick individuals from other species. The council chamber erupted in clicks and whistles of alarm. Zephyrian society was built on efficiency and order. The idea of helping members of other species was completely foreign to their culture. Most disturbing, Dr. Zekimura continued, is that some of our military officers are questioning the necessity of total species elimination. They are asking whether future conquests might be more valuable if we preserved some members of defeated civilizations to study their culture and knowledge. Vexithara felt something that might have been relief. He wasn't the only one whose thinking had been changed by the human transmissions. The humans did something to us, he said quietly. They forced us to see them as more than just military targets, and now we cannot unsee what they showed us. High Counselor Zarthek stood up, his tall frame imposing in the dim chamber lighting. This contamination must be contained. Order the immediate deletion of all human cultural data from our memory banks. That is impossible, Dr. Zekmora replied. The data has become too integrated into our systems. Millions of Zephyrians have accessed it. It exists in permanent memory storage across our entire civilization. Attempting to delete it would require wiping the memories of every citizen and soldier in the collective. Then issue an order forbidding access to the human files. High Counselor, Vexithara said carefully. Such an order would only increase interest in the forbidden information. The humans appear to have understood our psychology better than we understood theirs. The truth was even more complicated than Vexithara was willing to admit in front of the council. In the past year, he had personally reviewed the records from all 47 previous conquests. Each destroyed civilization had tried in their final moments to preserve something important about who they were. Art, science, philosophy, love, dreams, hopes for the future. The collective had destroyed not just 47 military forces, but 47 unique ways of understanding the universe. 47 different approaches to solving problems, creating beauty and finding meaning in existence. All of that knowledge was gone forever and the galaxy was poorer for its loss. What do you recommend, Fleet Commander? Zarthek asked. Vexithara looked around the chamber at the most powerful leaders of his civilization. The humans called it a mercy rule. They said that in any conflict, you should spare someone to remember what happened, not just the defeat, but the whole story of who was involved and what was lost. You are suggesting we show mercy to our enemies? I am suggesting that total destruction might not be the most efficient strategy for long-term galactic stability. The knowledge we have, lost by eliminating 47 civilizations, could have been used to solve problems we don't even know we have yet. The council fell silent. For a species that prized efficiency above all else, the idea that their methods might be wasteful was deeply troubling. 6 months later, Vexithara found himself standing in a small garden that had been planted in the center of the Zephyrian capital. Young citizens had created it without official permission, using techniques they had learned from the human agricultural database. The garden served no practical purpose except to bring beauty to an otherwise gray and functional city. A small monument stood in the center of the garden. The inscription was written in both Zephyrian and several alien languages, including English. To the 48 species who taught us that victory without understanding is meaningless. To humanity, who showed us that even in defeat, a people can choose how they will be remembered. Vexthera knew that somewhere in the galaxy, there were other civilizations that the collective would eventually encounter. When that happened, the Zephyrian military would have a choice to make. They could continue their old ways of total destruction,